After the somewhat laid-back reputation of beauty routines and grooming of the 70s, the 80s seemed much more obsessed with beauty, fitness, and desirability by comparison. A look back at images of women in the 80s showed that heavy makeup was in. Eyes, lips, and cheeks were often dominated by bold colors. While makeup brands expanded their color selections for lipstick, shadows, and blush, foundations usually didn't explore enough shades of brown, leaving black women and other women of color to mix up their own shades from various products or to make do with shades that didn't always look good. The only department store brand that focused on black women was Ebony's Fashion Fair Cosmetics, which had been on the market since '73. The importance of looking good in a society that had only recently begun appreciating the intellectual and cultural power of women was palpable. And as Miss Magazine's pivot showed, even feminists could join in on the frenzy. The stereotype of the unkempt and masculine feminist loomed in the background. Said one 27-year-old, "I'm feminine, not a feminist." I picture a feminist as someone who is masculine and who doesn't shave her legs and is doing everything she can to deny that she is feminine. As commentators pondered if women could have it all, careers, family, happiness, and if feminism was dying, youth and beauty seemed to hold more value than ever. For a lot of women in the workforce, especially those in entertainment and other public-facing roles, beauty and youth were key components of their careers. Up until the 70s, it was routine for airlines to retire flight attendants over the age of 32 or can them if they gained too much weight. On TV, news reporters were told to wear certain blouses or skirts, made to dye hair, and could be fired for gaining weight. For black women, standards were even more strict, with news anchors like Dorothy Reed in San Francisco being temporarily fired by her ABC affiliate in 1980 because she refused to remove her cornrows. After protests by clergy and the local chapter of the NAACP, Dorothy compromised with producers and got rid of multicolored beads on the braids in exchange for wearing them plain. When the publicity died down, the station fired her in the fall and she ended up at a black-owned radio station making 1/3 of the pay she had been making before. The same year of the cornrow controversy, 37-year-old Kansas City anchorwoman Christine Kraft was demoted from her position 8 months into her 2-year contract at KMBC TV when a focus group said she was too old, too unattractive, and wouldn't defer to men. Said a consultant, "Let's spend 30 seconds destroying Christine. Is she a mutt? Let's be honest about this." Christine left to do the news at another station, but in 1983 filed a lawsuit against the parent company, citing fraud as well as sex discrimination. The station hired Kraft for her journalistic abilities, so why demote her over her looks? "We'll never have our female Walter Cronkites without pioneers like Christine Kraft," said Gloria Steinem. The discrimination discourse was happening at the same time that news was leaning more heavily into entertainment and soft news, meant to soak up as much advertising dollars as possible.
So what will the Soviet General Secretary do to unwind between his heady engagements? Well, the Russians have requested and received copies of Platoon and Top Gun, and were also given copies of Cry Freedom, Nuts, and The Princess Bride.
Who the fuck cares? There was a lot more fluff, wrote one observer. Television anchor people are not news people. They're good-looking people hired to read the news, which is written by an ugly person on another floor of the station. The execs who fired Kraft claimed that viewers were so distracted by her appearance that they were not paying attention to her news reports. Before her lawsuit played out in court, Kraft's former bosses offered her $9,500 and all the clothes they had bought for her to wear on air as a settlement, telling her she would never win. After 2 trials in which both juries ruled in her favor and awarded her money, Kraft said, "It's no fun being known as the world's ugliest anchorwoman, believe me." It should be noted that juries did not agree with Christine's grievance that her male co-anchor made more than her. A 3rd trial would eventually overturn her wins, and the Supreme Court would refuse to hear an appeal, though Sandra Day O'Connor issued a supportive statement. When Kraft quit her new reporting job and embarked on a lecture tour and wrote a book, she was called opportunistic. She said, "I'm not a feminist, I'm a reporter, but there seem to be people out there who want to hear what I have to say." The Christine Kraft incident showed what women in certain professions could stand to lose if they did not participate in beautification or embody beauty standards, and no doubt this could take an extreme mental toll. The 1983 death of singer Karen Carpenter briefly put a spotlight on anorexia nervosa, which caused papers like the New York Times to remind people that it wasn't a new disease. Experts noticed an uptick of girls and young women dealing with eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia, though unhealthy binge diets seemed baked in the 1980s culture. Think the cabbage soup diet, the Beverly Hills diet, and liquid diets. In the early 80s, the Food and Drug Administration and experts disagreed on the usefulness and safety of diet pills like Aperdrine and Dexatrim, which were causing health complications for some users. And as for bulimia, it had only been classified in 1979. In the early 80s, it was appearing in approximately 40 of every 100,000 people, though this would decrease by the end of the decade when eating disorders were being taken more seriously.
What you are watching is a cake consuming a woman. It sounds funny unless you're one of the 5 million Americans consumed with eating or denying food. The cake could be any food. The woman could be anyone. If you or someone you care about needs help, call the Advanced Eating Disorders Treatment Program today.
Existing alongside the unhealthy fad diets, low-fat promises, and diet pills was a growing fitness industry. In 1980, female bodybuilding was officially recognized by the International Federation of Bodybuilding, and women would carve their own niche during the decade. Actress and activist Jane Fonda originally did ballet as exercise, but an injury in the late 70s led her to aerobics. After becoming obsessed under the tutelage of Lenny Kasdan, she released Jane Fonda's workout in 1982 at the age of 45. Not only did the tape end up boosting VCR sales by being one of the top-selling and rented tapes for 6 years, but it spawned an empire. Jane would release 24 videos over the next few decades, selling a total of 17 million copies to fund her political activism. For people who needed more than a tape, aerobics and jazzercise studios were opening in abundance. And between 1981 and 1985, 25 million Americans would attend a class. Aerobics was overwhelmingly white, female, and middle class, and for many women who hadn't participated in exercise since high school or college, if they even did sports or regular exercise then, 1980s fitness culture was appealing because it promised camaraderie, self-esteem, and body transformation. That last one is especially important.
So how'd you gain the weight? I ate a lot. No. You said 50 pounds. You shouldn't let that happen to you. You're very pretty. You know what? No, I don't want to hear. Let me tell you this. You're a pretty girl and you're single. You must lose the weight.
I'm going to. You know what? We are now AM Chicago. In Chicago, we're starting a diet with Oprah. Grace, yes. In conjunction with the Tribune, so that I have been put under pressure to finally do it.
Society valued thinness in women, regardless of their personal achievements or character. Consider the fact that the most popular episode of the most popular talk show of the decade, The Oprah Winfrey Show, was the Wagon of Fat episode. Proud of her liquid-only diet and prodded by fatphobic commentary all around her, Oprah wheeled out a wagon of 67 pounds of animal fat to show how much weight she lost. The obsession with weight loss and thinness was often for people with the money, time, access, and physical ability, often leaving out the poor and the disabled. Of course, crash diets and the obsession with thinness wasn't new, but the technology of the 80s made the problem more pressing and widespread. The constant images of thin and happy celebrities and tastemakers, along with very specific expectations of conventional beauty, meant more women could and did change some physical part of themselves in pursuit of perfection and more social currency. And what couldn't be changed by makeup, aerobics classes, and dieting could be changed with a scalpel. In 1986, nearly 100,000 liposuctions were performed, just 4 years after the technique had been introduced. And by 1988, more than 1 million Americans a year were going under the knife for some kind of plastic surgery. 88% of them were women. The problem was that plastic surgery at the time was a severely underregulated industry. Though any licensed physician could legally perform any medical procedure, that didn't mean they were qualified for all specialties. In addition to unscrupulous doctors operating on patients with dangerous preconditions and mental health issues, some people weren't being fully informed on complications or the possibility of further surgeries. Additionally, though the FDA was granted the power to regulate all medical devices in 1976, by 1988 it still hadn't officially approved or prohibited saline breast implants, which were getting very popular. Even though breast augmentation was largely seen as a vain cosmetic procedure, its growing availability would come to reflect new arguments about feminism, choices, and empowerment. And the plastic surgery adventures of celebrities like Dolly Parton and Cher were reported on with increasing frequency, normalizing the practice of elective surgery. Self-improvement became a gendered issue of self-empowerment, especially because of years of the premium placed on beauty. Suggested one writer in Miss, Plastic surgery was a way of reinventing yourself, or a strategy for women who dare to take control of their lives. This attitude of submitting to beauty expectations in order to better thrive and survive was seen in another area of concern for women, the workplace. In this arena, it was not only important to dress for success and don your best power suit with the strong shoulders, but it was all too common to let misogyny roll off of one's back to get ahead.